soon. Okay, sorry.
Oh, okay, so do you want to do the whole thing or do you want to?
Yeah, if you'll just start over with your part.
Oh, okay, you don't want to do intro?
That's okay.
Okay. So my name is Aaron David. I'm the technical services lead at East, and then along with me is Jordan. He's the technical service representative. So today we're just going to look at how to buy a PC and just things to consider when you're trying to buy one or what to look for. So first thing first, there are several factors you need to look at. So the budget, of course. So if you need to prioritize if your kid or yourself need to just need to get on internet, or do you want to use it for gaming or productivity or programming. And so once you prioritize, you can look at and what components that you'll need the most. And of course, there are different kinds of computers, right? So you can buy one that's pre-built. So you just go to manufacturer, you go to Walmart or Best Buy, and it's already built for you. Then there's also where you want to build it. So these are workstations where you buy the components from different stores, from different websites, you put it together, and you have a computer. And so these are some things you might want to consider. So when you're looking at a computer, you wonder what's in it. So for example, you buy a car, right? You want to know what's inside that car or what its components are, or even a house. So when you're buying a house, you want to know what's in it. Like, does it have a bedroom, a bathroom, and all that fun stuff. So here on a computer, you want to look at some of these factors. So a CPU, your storage, your memory, your GPU, power supply, and optical drives. And we'll talk about each single one. And I'll try to make it a little bit easier, and I'll try to compare it to maybe a car and how it kind of relates. All right. And then as well, you should have heard a lot of these different brands. And sometimes the brand isn't necessarily the thing to buy for. You just got to look at maybe the support or how the reviews, or sometimes even just how many people use it and what they like the most. So we have Asus, HP, and of course, everyone knows Apple. And then not only can you buy it from there, but it's also the different companies that have different components. So maybe if you want to buy power supply or a CPU, you can look at these companies and see what they sell and versus and how it's compared to other companies. All right, so let's get into the nitty gritty of the computer itself, right? So there are different kinds of operating systems. So if your kid wants to buy or wants a computer, you can try to determine what's a good operating system from them, right? So usually, Windows and Macs. So those are just Windows 10 or the latest Mac OS, which is definitely not Mojave, but something a little bit newer
Yes,
than that.
sir. I believe it's the current Mac
Yes.
OS.
Yep. Thanks, Jordan. So those are a little bit of learning curve for each single one. So if your kid is already familiar with Windows and they prefer to use Windows, they can use Windows, or prefer Mac OS, they can use Mac OS. But you just got to determine what they need versus the cost of it. As you know, Mac OS a lot of the times is a lot more expensive than Windows. And then software capability. And so as you're looking at what software you want to use or your kid wants to use, or what's the school recommended to buy or to use, then you got to determine those. So if your school says they have to use Final Cut Pro, then you have to get Mac, as that's the only software that will run on an Apple product. But other than that, if they're looking at, let's say, Adobe Premiere or just Chrome, Windows can run those. So they might just stick to Windows. All right. And so now let's just look at hardware and let's try to compare it to a car, and just so we can kind of learn a little bit and try to understand what each single thing are. So a motherboard is just I consider it as the thing that controls a lot of the components. So think of it as maybe the like the console on your car, right? So that console on your car controls a lot of the things. So when to start the car, like when to turn on the radio and all that. So that's your motherboard. Next, we have the CPU. So CPU is how fast it goes. So how fast can that computer run, right? So think of it as a car and your tires. So it's So the faster the wheels are, or let's say how well it runs on the terrain, on a road versus a mountain, that's why I would consider it as your CPU. So the faster it is, the better. And so with your car, if your tires are all year round where it can run through the snow, all through the mountains, you know that's a really good tire. So with a CPU, look at the gigahertz. The higher the gigahertz, the faster it will be. And sometimes your computers may not even need 3 gigahertz. It's just depending what you want to use it for. So if you want to do a lot of gaming, that'll be a 3 gigahertz you will want to use. But if they just need to use Chrome, get on the internet, get on the Google Classroom, that will stuff 1.5 will suffice. All right. And then hard drives. So hard drive is the storage. So this is where how much data can you download on your computer before it runs out of space. So there are different kinds of hard drives. So we have the, let's see, the SSD, so solid state drive, or yeah, solid state drive, which solid state drives are much more modern and faster. And it's not a spinning disk like a hard drive. So just know solid state drive is faster, but it's also more expensive. So usually a solid state drive, you'll want to use it for gaming. So if you want to download things faster, read it faster, that would work for that. But if your kid just wants to download, open Google Docs, or just download PDFs and all that, a hard disk would work. And of course, you can compare this to a car where if you have a really nice, actually, that might be hard to compare it to. Just know that solid state drive is a lot faster and it's comparable to storage. So storage is how much can you download and how much data it can hold in that computer before it runs out of space. And the thing to think about is if you're out of space, you either have to delete a lot of your stuff or replace the hard drive for more storage. And so actually a good example is think of it as a car where your car only has 2 seats, right? So you can only fit 2 people versus a 6-seater where you can put in 6 more people there. So the more drive in there or the much more gigabyte to a computer is comparable to a how many people can sit in a car. Alrighty. Hardware. Okay, so RAM is a little bit questionable or how to explain it, but the fastest way is how fast can your computer run? So this is how fast it can read and write. So it just runs it through, you can see the software and it'll turn on quickly. And you can compare this when you turn on your computer, how fast does it boot up? So if it boots up really slow, it might be your RAM is really low, which could be maybe 2 RAM, or versus it turns up really fast. That could be like 12 gigabytes of RAM. And so when you're buying the RAM, you have to think about what does it need. So I always compare it to a game, right? So of course, a game, it takes a lot of RAM. It will need a lot of RAM. So you need to be able to process all that information and then you're able to play that game. So maybe at least 12 RAM or 8 gigabytes of RAM to 12 will be perfect. But if your kid is just doing Zoom or is just running software that doesn't need that much RAM, so if you just need to run PDFs, Google Docs, 6 gigabytes of RAM will be perfect. And so, but as you know, the more RAM, it will be much more expensive. So a lot of times when you might have to sacrifice the RAM to be able to fit your budget. So if you have your budget at a certain, you might have to think, do I need this much RAM or can I work with a little bit slower computer so I can meet my budget? So as always with a car, when you're trying to buy a car, you want to try to get the best, fastest cylinder, right? So like a 6 engine cylinder will be perfect. But times, as you know, the more cylinders it is, the more expensive it is. So if you want to buy a very low end, like a motorcycle, you know it's a lot cheaper than a 6-cylinder vehicle. All right, graphics card. So graphics card is one thing that your kids might need to use. So we're in this age where we're doing a lot of CAD work. So that's computer aided design. So that's 3D modeling, that's making blueprints and those are needed. So graphics card is much needed on those, and that's where it renders it to make it look nicer, or to even just be able to use it. So think of it as a graphics card. Sometimes, even, of course, your game will need graphics card, but sometimes if your kid is just doing Zoom or is just on a PDF, they don't need the high-end graphics card, but you still do need it. And then power supplies. So power supplies is much needed. This is where you compare it to your laptop, right? You just have your own voltage, you check the voltage, make sure the power adapter fits, and make sure the voltage meets what is needed. So at some point, maybe if you have to replace the cable, make sure you have the right voltage. If it's too low of voltage, it might turn on or it may not turn on. And if it does turn on, it will go in and out, as you won't be able to exceed the limit of the laptop. Or if it's too much, it might actually break the laptop, where it's getting too much power, and it might hurt those capacitors or whatever is in the components in that thing. So remember, power supplies just have the right voltage, and you can actually either Google that or check on computer just to see what voltage it needs. All right, and then peripherals. So these are things that your kid might need or they may not need at all. So mice and keyboards, those are, if you have a laptop, it's already built in one, you don't need it. But if you're buying a workstation that's just a tower itself, you definitely need a mice and a keyboard and a monitor, because once you build a workstation, the monitor and the keyboard, mice and keyboard, aren't sometimes with that thing. Let's see. And then of course, headsets. This is where if your kid needs headsets to put it on, or just needs to be in a quiet room where it can hear other things going on, you can get them a headset. And with a mic, so that way they're easier to hear when they have to present. All right, so now you have the hardware. So these are things that you want to look for, or some things to use, right? But before we get on there, we're actually going to look at different computers and how to determine what's best, or even how to read this thing on their thing. So I'm going to Walmart, and let's say we're just looking up laptops, right? And we're going to try to put everything that we just learned and see if it's a good computer for just able to access Google Chrome and to be able to download things. Let's see. Let's look at this one. So a lot of the laptops should be able to tell you a bunch of information when you click on it. So here you can see already we talk about RAM, right? So 8 gigabytes of RAM. So this will be great for accessing Chrome, even playing maybe Minecraft on it, but not high-end games. But this will be great for students using getting on Zoom, even running software such as video editing or just photoshopping. And then 256 gigabytes of RAM or storage. So this is just looking at how much storage can you put in there. So 256 gigabytes. It may seem a lot, but usually at times, if you use the laptop for a year or two, you do run out of storage quick. So this might be great, but you'll have to keep in mind that there isn't as much storage, even though it is SSD. So it's a very fast storage where you can download and upload, but it still wouldn't you would still run out of space eventually. NVIDIA GTX is just telling you have for gaming if need be, but for this price, I wouldn't say it would be good to buy this, since $599, if you can, usually a 12 gigabytes of RAM would be around the cost of $599. So a good one, we're not saying you should buy this, but we're just looking at things to look at. Let's see, here's an 8 gigabytes of RAM. So usually 8 gigabytes of RAM is expensive. And so you want to try to balance, do you want it more or less? And so we looked at one that's 599 versus this, where it's the same RAM, memory RAM 8, and it's the same amount of storage. So the only difference is it didn't have those fancy words talking. It's mostly for gaming. You have Core i7, and so this would work for someone who needs to access Zoom, needs photoshopping or video editing. So that sometimes you just gotta differentiate which is needed, and if you just need those, you'd rather get this laptop versus the other one that was $599. Let's see. I think that's it comparable wise. And before we keep going forward as well, let's talk about Chromebooks. So Chromebooks are great. They are cheaper than most laptops, and they're great for able to just access Chrome and have internet. Right now, Chrome is a little bit restrictive where you can't download software and then run it. So if your kid needs to run Photoshop or video editing, they can't download that. But if your kid just needs to get on Zoom, get on Google Classroom, open documents through Google Docs, that Chromebook will be perfect. It'll be a lot cheaper, and they won't be able to download any software, which could be a good thing. So they won't be able to download viruses or anything that could steal their information. And we're always here for good internet safety. I think that's it about Chromebooks. So now let's go to software and other goodies. So once you buy your laptop or your workstation, you know there's a lot of things to download, right? You have to download Chrome because nobody wants to use Internet Explorer. They might have to download maybe Notepad++, or if you need Word but you don't have Word for free, this software here will be great to use. So what this is, it mass download things that you could need for your computer. So of course you'll click on Chrome. LibreOffice is great as this replaces Google Docs. I mean, not Google Docs, sorry, Office Word, which you have to pay for, but with LibreOffice, you don't. Um, if your kid somehow needs to use TeamViewer versus Zoom, or actually TeamViewer is just remote accessing, so they might not need that. But and then as your kid needs to start coding, so they might need some of these coding. They just click on it. There's some video converter, so they can download that. They can download a bunch of these if they need to, just software-wise imaging. And then all you have to do is get your Nanite. So what this will do is once the ones you checked off will actually start running. They will download it for you, and so you don't have to go to each website and try to download it. This website will do it for you. So just a cool, helpful tool on Nanite. PC part picker. So we talked about building your own computer, right? So that might be a little bit confusing on what components do you need? Do you need a CPU? What kind of CPU? Will these four different parts work together? And so this PC part picker will actually help you and do it for you here. So if you go to System Builder, it'll tell you exactly what you need to choose. So if you need a CPU, you just click on choose a CPU and you choose one of these. And as you can see, the prices are here. So you can best determine what's your budget on each component, and as well as what's the speed do you need. So sometimes, as we said, the higher the speed of the gigahertz, the more costlier it is. So just gotta be aware of that. And what's great about this is as you start putting things together, if a part and another part won't work together, it'll give an error saying, hey, you need to choose one of these or choose another one where this part will work with each other. So that's one great thing about this site, and it will compare all the prices and will try to find the best price for you. Alrighty, so that's it. That's all about hardware, software, what to look for, what kind of components are in your computer, what software that you could use, and versus what website you can use to build your computers. Thanks for hanging out with us. Hope you learned something.
So, Aaron, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
What is like the biggest mistake you guys see when people are buying a new computer?
So a lot of the times when someone wants to, we see this a lot in gaming where they think the more expensive it is, the better the computer is. And sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes you're just paying for the brand. So you see it as, oh, it says Asus or it says Alienware, like, ooh, that's so mystical, something so cool about it. But in reality, you're paying for the brand. So don't look at the brand, look at the components, look at what it's going to be used for, what's the speed, what's the RAM, and all that fun stuff.
And don't be afraid, I guess, to get an off-brand.
Yes. Yep. But do your research. So if the
Yeah.
off-brand seems really weird, you might want to think about it. But a lot of times, just Google, look at the reviews, see how well it's been used, and that's all there is to it.
That's what I was thinking too. I was thinking, like, I'm always scared to put down a lot of money on a computer because I'm like you. I think, oh, well, I'm not like you. I'm like some people who think, oh, it costs more. It must be a better computer. So good to know to do our research. Well, thank you guys so much. This is a great session. I learned a lot. And we'll be back next Tuesday with our session on Canvas. So be sure to tune in.